GoldenEye 007 is a Nintendo 64 game from 1997, and those of us who played it back then have fond memories of struggling through the single-player difficulties, playing side by side with 4 friends in battle mode and speedrunning our way to the target time so we could get Donkey Kong mode and other cheats. But it is also us, the exact same players that are the most bitter when we try to return to GoldenEye. Now, GoldenEye feels clunky, dated, and awkward in this modern era of video games. Like you, I thought GoldenEye was simply too old to live up to what it once was, merely a great game for its time, but only because we didn't know any better. But still, for some reason, I had a craving to play GoldenEye again. And something happened while I played recently. I realized that GoldenEye didn't change. We did. To fully understand when this change happened, we have to go back in time. The year was 1982 and a champion was born. Possibly the most intense, intelligent, and sophisticated of all babies. Too far back. Too far back? Fine, let's start with last week when I built myself this custom GoldenEye controller. Yes, I am playing on an actual Nintendo 64 with an actual GoldenEye cartridge, which thanks to my friend, I have 2 of. And an N64 controller. It's a third-party controller, which makes it easier for me to hack this thing apart without feeling bad about destroying an actual controller. You're safe. I built this controller in 3 parts. Movement controls, gun controls, and the last part, which was the toughest because I had to build my own wireless device which would activate the start button, but I'll explain that later. Gosh, it's cool when James Bond goes into his inventory. One day I'll have a watch just as cool as James Bond's. The first step was to make something I can step on. I was going to use my dance pad but was having issues with it, so I made my own. Button, cardboard, a little foam and hot glue, and I've got custom movement controls for up, down, left, and right. All activated by stepping on them. Next, I took aim at the gun controls by taking a Nerf gun and turning it into a James Bond GoldenEye gun. Stuck it to the analog stick for left and right, attached a dial for up and down, pull the trigger on the Nerf gun and James shoots his gun. Reload on the side along with aim and weapon switch on the top, and I've got all the gun controls I need. Another cool thing about using a Nerf gun and attaching it to the analog stick is it gives me a visual of why flight controls sometimes feels more natural to some people. This is me pushing up and moving up. This is me pushing down and moving down on the analog controller. But the nose of the gun is moving down when I'm pushing up, and it's moving up when I'm pushing down. The third part of the build was something I had to watch out for, which is accessing the inventory. James Bond uses his watch as the inventory screen when you press start, so I wanted to have my own watch and needed it to be wireless. The only problem is that I've never tried to use a radio transmitter to activate a button on a controller. I had no idea if this would work, but after I got it all set up, yeah, I've got a watch just like James Bond does. Only I don't think James Bond's watch is made out of trash. Got it. I created a watch, but I think I did a pretty good job with some simple electronic components and things I found in the wastebasket. After I finished the build and started playing, all of my focus was on getting used to using this crazy controller. Coordinating where my feet, the angle of my wrist, the trigger, my up-down dial, and my start button watch was more than I could handle. I'm completely overwhelmed. It's a terrible feeling and I'm absolutely hating it. But I've done this before, multiple times, so I know it's going to be like this. I have to create a whole new network of neural pathways and muscle memory. Every build is awkward, unnatural, and super frustrating at first, but then at some point, something magical happens. James Bond starts to move the way I want him to. And that section that was showing my failure over and over from every camera angle doesn't feel so impossible, and I beat it. Yes, I am playing on 00 Agent, which is top difficulty, and yes, this is starting to feel natural to me. It'll always be more difficult than on a controller since I have a lot more appendages to manage, but for the first time in 25 years, GoldenEye feels good again. But why? Now we need to go back in time. The year is 1996 and we are experiencing an analog stick for the very first time while playing Super Mario 64, which is going to be my next game. Which is also most people's first experience playing a 3D game. If the SNES controller was learning how to walk, then the Nintendo 64 controller was being thrown into the deep end of the pool. Just because you were a pro at one activity, walking, doesn't mean you won't drown while performing another activity, sinking. To play on the Nintendo 64 controller, you had to develop an entirely new skill set. And to further my point with laser precision, the controls from one first-person shooter like GoldenEye did not care that the controls from another first-person shooter like Shadows of the Empire, which came out the year before, were different. And Turok, which also came out before GoldenEye, controlled completely different. Yes, we often had to develop an entirely new set of muscle memory from one game to the next, and that was just to move your character around. That's why, back in the day, the greatest GoldenEye players who could destroy you even if you picked odd jobs looked like babies trying to walk for the first time while playing Turok.
You can jump in this game?
Yeah, to your doom. We no longer tolerate this non-uniform style of playing games. That's why every controller is the same controller. 2 analog sticks with a 4-button face D-pad on the side and double triggers for shoulders. It's also why I know how to play every game before I even play it. I know how to play a game before it's even released or the first line of code is written. This is what's known as intuitive gameplay, but calling it intuitive is not accurate. Really, it's the developers fitting their game's controls around what they already know your muscle memory currently is. Developers couldn't make intuitive controls before uniform controllers existed like in the Nintendo 64 days. And back in GoldenEye's day, GoldenEye was intuitive. Most people played GoldenEye style and would switch their other first-person shooters like Turok or Shadows to GoldenEye controls. GoldenEye controls were so burned into our hands that a decade later while playing Halo 3 on the Xbox 360 with my cousin, he switched his controls to GoldenEye's, moving Master Chief forward and backwards and looking right and left with the left analog stick, just like we used to do with James Bond. I'll say it again, GoldenEye didn't change, we did, and this is when the change happened. During the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube era. This was the last time we were truly asked to learn how to play all over again. Nintendo tried to keep it unique with the Wii, but at the end of the day they totally sold out and made their Switch controller the exact same that the Xbox and PlayStation use. For 20 years we haven't had to learn how to play a game, unless it was something like Guitar Hero. And because of that we no longer tolerate any game that dares ask us to play differently. But we used to. We used to just expect that each game was going to be its own unique experience in every way, controls included. That some games you could jump in and others you couldn't. Some you could look up and down, some you couldn't. Some controlled better with the D-pad, some with the analog stick, some you moved with right hand and looked with left. Others it was the other way around, and still others it was a wild mix of both and combinations in between. I am of course glossing over the fact that there were different control schemes in GoldenEye, but I'm making a point here, and even with any other control scheme, GoldenEye is going to feel strange in modern times. I didn't remember this aspect of gaming until I started building custom controllers which required a custom playstyle. I think you also understand this because I'm willing to bet that you remember your first time playing Guitar Hero or Dance Dance Revolution, and that's not just because it was new, but also because you were building a new kinetic memory. It's a memory overdose of new experiences, causing your brain to fire on all cylinders. It's why we have fond memories of the arcades and old school consoles before everything turned into one of these, and gaming became intuitive. If you want to play GoldenEye today, you'll have to take the time to get used to its controls, which is how we used to play back when GoldenEye first came out. I got through the first 5 levels, which I think is a pretty good testament to the controller working well, but I'd like to make some improvements to the controller before I venture on to the next 15. If I can get the controller really feeling good, maybe I'll try and get the facility cheat, which is on a 00 agent difficulty. It's got a completion time of 205. It's really tough, maybe the toughest cheat to unlock, but I think I can do it if the controller is really solid. Go, go! Holy crap, are you freaking serious? There's 3 guys there! Also, I'd love to get some friends together and do a 4-player battle mode. I'm gonna push for that, but we'll see how it goes. I think playing battle mode on this controller would be tons of fun. And it'd be cool seeing how other people attempt to get used to playing on this thing as well. Because of your modern training, GoldenEye's controls will feel strange. The aiming, the AI, the objectives, the way you have to think. How the enemies can't shoot you when you're too close, how they shoot through each other. Pressing the start button and getting shot while it takes James a lifetime to look at his watch will all feel awkward because you want GoldenEye to be something that it's not. You don't watch Charlie Chaplin's City Lights and think, boy, I wish there was talking and color and they should have made it 3D, because that would be missing the whole point of watching that movie. It was a product of its time, and in spite of that, it's one of the greatest movies ever made. GoldenEye is a singular game with its own feel, a unique experience that doesn't exist on any other console or in any other game. Oh, hi, Perfect Dark. And when I started playing it with that attitude, it felt good again. Every game today is the same game, but GoldenEye is GoldenEye.